Hello everyone, welcome to Drishti IS. You're watching the NCERT Foundation series wherein we cover the subject of polity with the help of MCQs and PYQs. And today we are going to complete the remaining portion of your Class 11 NCERT Chapter 4 titled The Executive. So let's first take a quick look at the topics that have been covered and the topics that we'll be covering today. So this first topic dealing with the forms of government has already been covered in sufficient detail and we have talked about all the three forms of government. Then of course I have brought for you a couple of questions on the political and permanent executive, and even today I have brought for you a couple of questions on the bureaucracy. Of course, the election of president has also been covered in quite some detail, along with some powers and some functions. Now, this is something that we'll be covering in more detail in the subsequent videos. And today we are going to be focusing on Prime Minister along with a question or two on the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers. And this about sums up your entire chapter 4 of Class 11 NCERT. So without further ado, let's plunge right in. Let's begin with the previous day question where I had asked you, in which of the following situations can the president act without ministerial advice? Now, let's first try and understand the context of the question. What the question is trying to ask you is whether the president can ever act in his own discretion or whether the president is always bound by the advice of the Council of Ministers. Remember how we had discussed in Article 74 that the term shall has been used, that there shall be a council of ministers, to aid and assist the president in the exercise of his functions, and the president shall be bound by such advice. The president shall act in such advice. So, the whole idea over here is that the president is bound by the Council of Ministers' advice. Now, whether the president can exercise some discretion or not is what your question wants to know. The president can indeed exercise some discretion, but it is limited. So there are three situations where the president can exercise discretion. Let's see when. The first happens in terms of the advice that we're talking about. The fact that the president can send the advice back to the Council of Ministers for reconsideration itself shows some limited discretion that the president can exercise. Now remember, the discretion is limited. And of course, the advice once sent back by the Council of Ministers to the president is finally binding on the president. This is something we discussed yesterday. Another thing is regarding bills. So, ordinary bills or bills that are not money bills, here also the president may exercise his pocket veto, which means the president may keep the bill or withhold assent from the bill for the time being for an unlimited period of time. There is no time frame, no time limit within which the president has to give his assent to the bill. All right. So the example of Gyani Zail Singh ji comes to mind, who kind of exercised his pocket veto with reference to the Indian Post Office Amendment Act. The Indian Post Office Amendment Act. So in 1986, the then president Gyani Zail Singh ji did not give his assent to the bill because it was widely criticized as curtailing the freedom of press. All right. So he did not assent. The following president, Venkat Ramanji, sent the bill back to the Council of Ministers for reconsideration. But by then, the government had also changed, and then the bill was never passed again by the parliament. All right. So this is again a limited yet effective, discretionary power that the president may exercise. Finally, this happens, the third one happens to be a very situational discretion, in the sense that in case of a hung parliament, when no clear party can claim majority, and for example, 2-3 leaders are claiming to form a leadership or claiming to form a government. In that case, the president exercises his discretion and chooses the leader that can form the government and run the government. So here again, a limited yet effective discretionary power lies with the president. So, with the background of this information, let's try to attempt our question. We have to find out situation where the president has to act without ministerial advice or may act without ministerial advice. So the option says during proclamation under Article 356. This is referring to the president's rule. No, that does not happen. Appointment of PM in a hung parliament. This is absolutely correct. Dissolution of Lok Sabha after no confidence vote. So here, the dissolution of Lok Sabha may also happen on the advice of the Prime Minister. That may happen. All right. And option D says promulgation of ordinance under Article 123. Yet again, no, here also the advice of the Council of Ministers is tended to. So we have our correct answer, which is option number B. The Vice President of India is elected. So now we are talking about the Vice President of India, which is the second highest constitutional position of the country. It is the second highest constitutional office in the country. How is the Vice President elected? So in the previous lecture, we had talked about the election of the President and the election of the Vice President in terms of methodology is the same, in the sense that it does use the or adopts the method of proportional representation by means of a single transferable vote. So the same process as is followed in the election of the President. Here again, the election takes place by a secret ballot. What is the eligibility criteria? Of course, the person contesting for the position has to be the citizen of India. It is again the same as the president has to be over 35 years of age and this person who is contesting for the position of the vice president should be eligible to be a member of the Rajya Sabha or should be qualified to be a member of the Rajya Sabha. Now, why Rajya Sabha? Because the vice president is the ex officio chairman of the Rajya Sabha. In the case of the president, the term or the qualification was that to be able to be a member of the Lok Sabha. Here, a fourth condition is also added, that this person should not hold an office of profit. So these are the 4 conditions. These are the 4 conditions that qualify a person to be eligible to be able to contest for this post of the vice president. Now, what about the electoral college? So when we talked about the president, what did we discuss? All elected members of the parliament, all elected MLAs of all states, and the elected MLAs of Delhi and Puducherry. What happens in the case of vice president, since we are doing a comparative analysis here? So, in case of the vice president, we have already seen that the process is similar. It's an indirect election. It's a preference-based election by means of a single transferable vote. Now, here, remember how we focused on all elected MPs? However, in case of the election of the vice president, all members of the parliament, elected as well as nominated, vote. They are eligible to vote for the election of the vice president. Here, of course, elected MLAs are eligible to vote, but in the case of the election to the vice president, MLAs cannot cast their vote. They are not eligible to vote. And same with the Union Territories of Delhi and Puducherry. Even here, they cannot cast their vote. So what is necessary is basically all members of the parliament, elected as well as nominated, should cast their vote to elect the vice president of India. Now let's also talk about removal. How is the president removed? Interestingly, the president's removal is called impeachment. It is known as impeachment, and the president can be removed for violation of the constitution. Violation of the constitution. What is meant by the violation of the constitution has not been specified in the constitution. All right. So these are the grounds. These are the grounds of the president's impeachment. Now it's obvious that if the highest office in the country is getting impeached, then the procedure is going to be very complicated. It's not going to be a simple majority. So a resolution or a motion to impeach the president can begin in either house of the parliament. All right. It can begin in either house of the parliament, either Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha. And the resolution has to be passed by 2/3 membership, 2/3 of total membership of the house. So let's say the Rajya Sabha, let's say the Lok Sabha initiates the impeachment process. So initially the Lok Sabha will have to pass a resolution to that effect by a majority of the 2/3 members of the total members of the house. After that, the president is given a 14-day notice. And the other house. So for example, Lok Sabha initiated the motion here. So the Rajya Sabha is going to inquire into the charges and investigate into the charges, whether the charges of constitutional violation hold true or not. In case the other house, in our example, the Rajya Sabha, is satisfied in their inquiry that such a violation has taken place, then they would also need to pass that motion or that resolution by, again, 2/3 majority of the total membership of the house. And once that happened, the president stands impeached. In case of the vice president, though, the term impeachment is not used. Okay? It simply is referred to as the removal of the vice president. What are the grounds? The grounds have also not been specified. The process simply says that the resolution or the motion to remove the vice president has to be passed by an effective majority of the Rajya Sabha and agreed to by the Lok Sabha. So, it has to be passed by an effective majority in the Rajya Sabha and agreed to by Lok Sabha. Now, where does the charge initiate? Where can this resolution initiate? Can it initiate in both houses of the parliament? No. It can initiate only in Rajya Sabha. Only in Rajya Sabha. What is the meaning of effective majority? You have to tell me in the comments. What is the meaning of effective majority? Because it's a very interesting concept right here. All right. And agreed to by Lok Sabha. Agreement simply means simple majority. That once an effective majority has supported the notion or the motion of the impeachment, the removal of the vice president, a simple majority of the Lok Sabha is sufficient to exercise that removal. All right. So, this is the comparative analysis of the process of removal of the president as well as the vice president of India. So, with this background in mind, let's try and attempt our question. So, the vice president of India is elected clearly not directly by the people. We know that it is an indirect election. It is an indirect election by both houses of the parliament, and with this we have arrived at the correct answer, which is option number B. The next question says the vice president can be removed by. We just talked about the removal of the vice president, and it's fairly straightforward over here. Again, your option B, which is the resolution by Rajya Sabha and agreement by Lok Sabha. The agreement means simple majority, and the resolution by Rajya Sabha has to be passed by an effective majority. And once again, I'll reiterate, you have to explain to me in the comment section what the meaning of effective majority is. All right. This has to be an interactive process. So, option B over here again is the correct answer. So, the next question is incidentally a PYQ, a previous year's question that I've brought for you. Consider the following statements. Statement 1 says the executive power of the Union of India is vested in the Prime Minister. Now, this can be a very tricky statement. Why? Because most of us would instantly think that, of course, the Prime Minister is the de facto head and the real executive power actually lies in the office of the Prime Minister. However, if we go by the Constitution, constitutionally, the executive power of India is vested in the President. So, if we go by Article 53, the Article 53 vests the real executive power, or the executive power is constitutionally vested in the office of the President. So, while it may be very tempting to believe that this statement is correct, it is in fact inaccurate, because the executive power has been constitutionally vested in the President of India. The second statement says the Prime Minister is the ex officio chairman of the Civil Services Board. Now, what exactly is the Civil Services Board? Let's first try to understand. Now, we are aware of the bureaucracy, which is the permanent executive and the administrative machinery of the state. All right, by state, I mean the state with a capital S, the country. Now, of course, they're also prone to a lot of political interference. They ought to be non-partisan. But what happens is that various political leaders might interfere in their work and might take certain punitive steps in the form of transfers and postings that are not justified. So, in order to insulate the bureaucracy from political interference, the Civil Services Board are envisaged for the center as well as for the states. Now, this was the Civil Services Board. This idea was further strengthened by a 2013 judgment of the Supreme Court, wherein our apex court gave the directions that such boards be constituted. All right. This was the TSR Subramaniam versus the Union of India case. Now, in the case of center, who heads the Civil Services Board or who chairs it? The Cabinet Secretary. And this functions under the Department of Personnel and Training. What about in the case of states? In case of states, the Chief Secretary is the chair or is the head. Why they have given you in the previous year's paper the question that deals with the chairmanship or the headship of this Civil Services Board is because once here certain transfers or promotions or some sort of postings or tenure related decisions are taken, they are taken by the Cabinet Secretary and the board, but the final authority lies with the Appointments Committee, which is headed by the Prime Minister. This is headed by the Prime Minister. And in order to trigger this confusion in your mind, this particular statement was given to you. So, is the Prime Minister the ex officio chairman of the Civil Services Board? No, the Prime Minister is not. In case of the center, the Cabinet Secretary is the chairman, whereas in case of the states, the Chief Secretary heads the Civil Services Board. However, the Appointment Committee is headed by the Prime Minister. You may note that down for some extra information. So, this again is wrong, and therefore neither 1 nor 2 And option D happens to be our correct answer. Now, which of the following is our correct regarding All India services? First, created under Article 312. This is accurate. So, the All India services are created by the Parliament. They are in fact created by the Parliament under Article 312, but only if Rajya Sabha approves or supports with a resolution containing 2/3 majority of members present and voting. So this is the resolution that has to be approved by the Rajya Sabha. Only then can an All India services be created under Article 312. At present, we have 3 All India services. Which are they? They are the Indian Administrative Services, the Indian Police Services, and the Indian Forest Services. This was added in 1966. Do not get confused. We are talking about Indian Forest Services. All right. The second statement says members are recruited by the center but serve under states. This is also accurate. Members are recruited by the UPSC. We're all, aware of the fact that this is considered to be one of the most prestigious examinations in the country. And of course, members are recruited by the UPSC because they expect a lot of merit, a lot of neutrality and non-partisanship along with professionalism, right? So, however, of course, they serve under states because you remember, if you see all your toppers in the interviews, they tell which is their cadre preferences, right? So, they could prefer Agmat cadre or or Tamil Nadu cadre, however they like it. So basically, they do work under the administrative machinery in the states. All right. Supervision is that of the states. So this is factually correct. Option 3 says disciplinary control rests with the state PSC. No, in fact, this is inaccurate. So the DOPT, the Department of Personnel and Training, does frame rules of service and discipline. So the rules of service and discipline are framed by the Department of Personnel and Training, DOPT. All right. However, the state may recommend some disciplinary action, let's say in the form of suspension. But again, who exercises the final authority? It rests with the center, not with the states. So this again is inaccurate. So we have 2 correct statements and 1 wrong statement. Therefore, option A is our correct answer. I hope all of this is clear. The next question talks about reservation in civil services for ST, STs, OBCs, EWs, etc. Now, we know and we just discussed that this is one of the most thoroughly competitive and thoroughly prestigious examination and of course a thoroughly prestigious post to hold. And our constitution makers were very well aware that what is needed is merit as well as non-partisanship. And hence, they foresaw that UPSC or a commission like UPSC for the Center for All India Services and state PSCs were necessary, all right, in order to bring out the best talent of the country. So, of course, a lot of qualities like professionalism and neutrality in service, etc., are required, and definitely a lot of merit as well. However, while the main norms are meritocracy, what is also needed is that everybody, including the marginalized sections of the society, should get an opportunity to be a part of bureaucracy, to be a part of public service. And their historical background and their historical circumstances should not affect their chances, all right? And hence, the provision for the reservation of the SCs and STs was made, subsequently followed by the OBCs as well as EWS. So the whole idea was to bring in a bureaucracy or an administrative machinery which is connected to the people, at the grassroots and represents them. All right? So it has to be represented. It has to be representative in nature. That was the whole idea. And therefore, option B happens to be our correct answer. So, with this, I have also brought for you a practice question. Kindly take a look at it. If you found today's session useful, please let me know in the comments. And also let me know the answer to the question that I just asked in the video in the comments. And if you found that the overall content is becoming useful for you, kindly also check out the course, the online NCERT course that Drishti has to offer. It's a very good course. And of course, like, share and subscribe. And thanks for watching.
For more informative content, like, share and subscribe, and do not forget to press the bell icon to get the notifications.